the arrow keys. Hey, this is TLS. We're going to start now. Can you hear me? I've wondered how the audio was up here for all week. So should I back off the mic? All right, let's do this. Thanks. If you're not here for TLS, please leave. I'm just learning. Here's the note. Well, what's today? Tuesday? It's Tuesday. You should have seen this a little bit. Basically, it's about IPR rules. If you know about stuff, IPR related topics we're discussing, you're supposed to mention them. You're going to be recorded, that kind of stuff. Please read. Requests. We need a minute taker and a jabber scribe. And we can't proceed until we get one of them.
Minute taker?
Jabber. Thank you, David. Note taker. What we need is we don't need a play-by-play minute taker. We just need people that actually take the action items and the output. There we go, Rich. Thank you very much. All right, the blue sheets are going around. Please sign them. When you're at the microphone, please state your name for the minutes. Let's keep it professional, and let's try to be succinct. All right, here's our agenda time. As you may have seen on the list, we instituted a new presentation policy that we want presentations early. Please do that. We're going to do some adjustments based on that because somebody was super late. So here's our agenda for today. Delegated signing keys, made delegated certificates. This is a suggestion to rename it. Returning routability check for TLS, deprecating MD5, flags extensions, suppressing intermediate certificates, and TLS 1.3 impacts on network-based security. The difference, I guess I should have noted that the drafts between the two lines are working group drafts and the other drafts are individual submissions. And that'll be our agenda for Thursday. Here's our document status. We have Greece is in the AD evaluation. We have exported authenticators is going to, waiting for write-up from Ben. We have publication requested of 2, the issues and requirements for SNI, TLS certificate compression. We hope to have DTLS 1.3 and the DTLS connection ID and working group last call shortly. That obviously assumes that we can address those issues like this week. So that's kind of one of our main things that we're hoping to do. Then we have in progress is the rest of the other drafts. The deprecating credentials, ESNI for TLS, deprecating TLS 1.0 and 1.1. Sorry, that's in the wrong slide. That is being publication requested. That's already been through working group last call. Ticket requests, insert plus PSK and external PSK importers. Just wanted to let you guys know, since we've lowered the code bars, and basically the DEs can assign code points for many of our drafts. I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up that they've been busy. So here's a bunch of schemes. The ones on the left are working group, IETF working group assigned drafts that were either assigned as a result of early allocations. So we got a couple there, and then we have a bunch of other ones that may or may not be published in RFCs. We don't know. Just kind of a heads up. One of the things I'm looking at is trying to get IANA to actually copy the TLS list, so we'll know when the values are assigned, so implementers will know what they are. So it's just kind of a heads up, because I bet you a lot of you didn't know about some of these. We have a website. Chris did a lot of work on this. It's still up there, and if people want to get on there and start hacking away, feel free. All right, that's it.
Actually, real quickly, the CFRG is actively doing or conducting a PAIC selection process to identify some PAIC, well, at least one PAIC or maybe none. I don't actually know what the criteria is. And they're actively going through that right now. And as you may have seen on the list, they're discussing integration with TLS. Stanislav is here to potentially give us some insight into what the CFRG is requesting from the TLS working group. So I'll give you the floor.
Thank you. Stanislav Smyslev, CFRG Secretary. So actually, we are currently in the process of selecting 1 or 2 or maybe 0 PAICs as a result of the selection process. And one of most important questions is integration into TLS. And since we've had a lot of discussions and a lot of possibilities and drafts of integration of OPEC into TLS, SPAIC2 into TLS, etc., we've had a lot of discussions of how to integrate any PAKes into TLS. So we'll have a call for experts, call for reviews for a number of questions. And one of these questions is integration into TLS. So if you will be at CFRG on Thursday, you'll hear this call for experts. And if you don't, please just know that we really need as an expert view from the TLS working group point of view about each candidate, about each nominated PAC, because we really want that if we choose one or two, that they will be really convenient for usage, for example, in TLS. Thank you.
Very good. All right. So first up is delegated credentials from Nick.
Is this a, I tell you on the next slide type of thing? Or is there Great. So delegated credentials, we've been working on this for quite a lot. We're on draft 4. There are 2 changes in 4. One very minor, adding the TLS extension text for IANA. Have not submitted the code point request yet, but to be done. And also extending this delegated credentials functionality to work with client certificates. Running code update, we have a site running with the 7-day delegated credential that auto updates, and a certificate with the appropriate OID. There is a patch for server side that is has done in Boring SSL, as well as a patch on the client side in NSS, which has been integrated into Firefox, which I believe is behind a preference flag, or if not, will be very soon. Martin?
Yeah, Martin Thompson, I can report on NSS. NSS has support for both client and server on this one. Our command line tool doesn't have server support just yet to do. The patch for Firefox for the pref is landed, but not yet in Nightly. I just updated Nightly and it hasn't appeared yet. Tomorrow, I imagine. There's a bunch of sort of plumbing stuff that we need to do, but we expect to have that one turned on in Nightly soonish, probably within a couple of weeks. We are waiting on Jonathan's analysis before we do anything crazy like ship it in release, those sorts of things.
Yep, and I've heard also some rumors from Facebook that there may be some implementation, so maybe someone from them can comment.
Kyle Neckritz. We have support in development in the Fizz library. I believe we verified interop was at least Boring SSL. It's not landed yet, but over the coming months it should be.
Okay, so this is the running code update. There are currently 4 open issues to discuss here. Some of these are just editorial and pretty minor, so I'll go over these. Cut ties with lurk, there's references to the lurk ID. It may not be canonical to reference an ID that is not going to be published in here, so there are ways of replacing this with generic text. PSS, we are not explicit about not supporting PKCS1 in the current draft, and I believe that's pretty non-controversial to remove this. Martin?
Yeah, Martin Thompson, I support the proposal that you have here, but I think there's probably a little bit more that needs to be said here. I recently implemented support for the PSS SPKI for the delegated credential, and it was a little tricky. So there's a little bit of fiddling around that you need to do in order to get those all working. So there's if everyone will remember, there's 2 signature schemes for every hash function for RSA. There is the PSS signature scheme that uses the RSA encryption SPKI, and then the same that uses the PSS SPKI. And there's not a lot of wide support for the PSS SPKIs because we don't see them in certificates, but we may see them in delegated credentials. And so there's a little bit of tricky stuff to deal with in this area. Probably worth doing a little bit more discussion in the draft about these ones.
Okay, and do you have any proposed text for this?
I can help with the text on this one if you're going to put me on the spot. Yeah, okay. I'll put it on my to-do list, but it might take a little while.
We can continue with this offline. The other piece here is last meeting we discussed not going forward with an RFC until there's some type of formal analysis. So this is an outline of a formal analysis proof that Jonathan Hoyland has volunteered to do. This is his outline. In terms of what we want to prove is that delegate credentials do not weaken the current PKI and that they strengthen the current PKI. There is a set of formal requirements for this to be secure. This is going to be a by-hand proof. And this is from the composition result from Cheval and all to define a set of requirements on PKIs and public key protocols that when used together are secure. The proof sketch is assume that the current PKI is secure. Haha.
There's a star there.
But in any case, that's the assumption boundary, and that's the assumption boundary we've had for TLS as well. And maybe Jonathan can comment more because he's at the mic.
Yeah, the assume the current PKI is secure is not so much that I believe the current PKI is secure. It's that I think we can prove that anything that's broken about PKI plus delegated credentials is also broken in the PKI, and therefore we don't have to care about that.
Right. So it's an implication error arrow in that if this is broken, then the entire PKI is broken. And then several other points here proving specifically that this gives us the properties that we want, essentially.
Yeah, the delegated credentials are secure, can be composed with the PKI, and that they therefore can complete a PKI in and of themselves. Right.
So this is the other question. Someone actually brought something up earlier. This might not be the right name for it, but there's been some confusion about delegated credentials. This is not really a credential as much as it is a narrowing of the scope of time and a swap of the key. There's no additional properties that this imbues onto the connection. It doesn't say anything about the key usages. It doesn't say anything about the host names or the SANs or anything like this. So it may be worth, I brought up this idea of changing the name from delegated credentials to delegated signing keys. And it was reminded that in potential future versions of TLS, there may be semi-static TLS. So I haven't had a chance to change that. So maybe the proposal is delegated authentication keys. And if anyone's violently opposed to the name, I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. But credential here is a confusing word and it's loaded. And so we might not want to use this in this context.
I guess the question from the chair's perspective in trying to move the document forward, is there anybody that's going to like fall on the sword if he picks a name that's different than what it is now? I mean, obviously, knowing that Nick is a reasonable man and he's not just going to make up some crazy name. Okay. Great.
Delegated authentication keys, because that's really what we're doing, is we're delegating the handshake authentication key. And that's it. So with respect to where the document is, it's gone through several reviews, lots of implementation. We are going to get more production deployment experience very soon. As I mentioned, there are servers up, there are clients, there's different stacks that have interoperability. There's kind of two options here. We discussed the formal analysis as being important for the RFC, but as it's potentially useful for these things to go in parallel. So we could begin the last call alongside the formal analysis, or we could wait for the formal analysis to be complete. And I'm bringing this to the floor to see what people prefer.
Eric Scorla, and I don't think it matters super much which one we do. I guess my vote would be to do the last call concurrently, just because then we're like not burning whatever it is, 2 weeks afterwards that the formal analysis is complete. I think it's a reasonable assumption the formal analysis will be like, will come out okay. If it doesn't come out okay, then like we're gonna have much bigger problems than like having to redo the last call. So I think I would do them concurrently, but I think also if people feel strongly the other way, it doesn't really matter.
Sabot Angar. I think there's not many changes coming down the pipe. Seems like a few issues, editorial issues mostly. So I think having last call forces us to make it such that it's a pretty stable version where somebody can do a formal analysis on, and then it won't change as much violently anymore.
Yeah, and it helps us solidify the code point.
Yeah, Martin Thompson, I'm reasonably happy with the bulk of the document. The only hole that I'm aware of is the formal analysis. I would not want to conclude a last call before that formal analysis comes in, but I think I'd be okay with running the working group last call up until the point when the analysis comes in, and then we can make the decision.
So I think the point is that we can start them at the same time, and we will not progress the document until the formal analysis completes.
Absolutely.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that if the things that we're proposing now, unless anyone has anything new that they want to add, it looks like once we get a new version, we can start that whole process.
Stephen Barrell, just to clarify, I think starting them in parallel is fine, but when the formal analysis comes in, you don't just immediately end the working group last call before people have had a chance to read it, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Roman is an individual. I agree you can parallelize them, and depending on which one comes first, you can say you'll gate until the conclusion of both.
Well, I can guarantee you that if we start a working group last call in 2 weeks, that we'll probably be done first, because I think it takes a little bit more brain power than.
But we can wait.
Yeah, we can wait. That's what I mean. We can start it and wait, and then give people a chance to review it before we progress it forward.
Okay, that's it for delegated credentials. Any other questions?
Are there any other open issues that people know about? All right, so
Sabot Angar. I just raised an open issue. I just raised an issue which is currently open. It's about interaction between session tickets and delegated credentials. One of the open questions that issue raises is whether if a session ticket is issued by a server and it would have served up a delegated credential, is there any risk to it being accepted by a server that would not have been would not have served up a delegated credential if they shared the session ticket secrets between each other? I do not think that that's an issue, but that's something that I would love for people to pay attention to and kind of think about that in the working group.
That doesn't sound like something that would change the wire format. That would be editorial.
So, Martin Thompson, thanks for pointing that out, Sabot. I think it's probably worth going into some detail about this one. I would caution, however, that the way that people do effectively the authorization decision or the authentication choices on resumption vary wildly between implementations. And so the best you can really do here is advice, making sure that people are aware of the situation and the consequence of it. So there may just be security considerations text that you're talking about.
So one final question for you, Nick. Are we looking at like September's timeframe for the next version so we can, that sound about right? I mean, obviously dependent upon how much review and comments we get.
Yeah, we should definitely have it by then.
Great.
The
That's
next
fantastic.
version incorporating, closing all of these issues.
Wonderful. Thank you. This one? All right. Delegating MD5 and SHA-1 signatures.
Hello. So the draft is nice and short. The idea is to make the signature algorithms extension mandatory for TLS 1.2 connections, as well as forbid advertising MD5 and SHA-1 based algorithms in a bunch of different places. So this was originally proposed as part of the TLS 1.0 and 1.1 deprecation discussion. I think the idea there was that TLS 1.2 with MD5 or SHA-1 could potentially be less safe than 1.0 or 1.1, but either way, it seems like a good time to do this deprecation work. So we collected some data from Cloudflare's network, and it seems that the number of TLS 1.2 connections that either don't have a signature algorithms extension or only advertise MD5 and SHA-1 algorithms is really small. But of course, this is just one data point. So if anyone has any data that they want to share with us, then please do. So I guess that's it. In terms of next steps, I guess I wonder if the working group could consider adoption. But if you have any questions.
Ben Kadok, so when you say make signature algorithms mandatory, does that mean that like servers are going to handshake failure if they don't see it?
Yes, so I think the current text says that servers should close the must close the connection if they don't see a signature algorithms.
Adam Langley. Measuring the incoming connections to Cloudflare measures like the client population, which is very, very different from the server population. I just wanted to let you know that I think as a client, like deprecating it would be way harder for us. So we may be a little bit laggard on this.
Right. I guess it's kind of the same discussion we had with TLS 1.0 and 1.1, which is like we should start telling people that they shouldn't use this, and then maybe they will stop using it.
Oh yeah, publish the document, but with expectations set reasonably.
But yeah, I mean, if you have some data to share, then it would be interesting to look at it. Okay.
Hannes, I assume the first statement applies only to cipher suites that use public key crypto. So if I do a pre-chat secret, or let's say password-based authenticated key exchange, then that doesn't apply. The first one.
I think the draft says anything about that.
Because it feels like wrong to mandate sending signature algorithms for cipher suites that don't even make use of signatures.
Yeah, potentially. I guess we can add some text about that.
Andrei Popov, Microsoft. Basically, I agree with the intent of this draft. I think it's a good idea to do this. I don't think I can enforce this at this time. So, but at some time in the future, it will be a good idea.
Yeah, sure.
Eric Squilla. Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for not naming this die. Second, I mean, it just generally seems a good idea. I'm in favor of adoption, which I think is the question you're asking. In terms of the, I'm sure we can workshop some of the technical bits later. Hannes, I think, is correct that obviously you shouldn't require signature algorithms if the client is like only offering PSK cipher suites, but that's easy to fix. I think the question of whether or not to require failure upon not receiving signature algorithms, like largely can be resolved by, as you say, taking measurements of what clients offer. Another reasonable alternative would be to pretend the client sent SHA-2 at SHA-256 and proceed as is. But unless we can find evidence that clients like that exist, then we should just go ahead and require it. We should require it in any case, but the question of whether you require to abort depends on whether there are a lot of clients who would take a SHA-2 certificate but somehow don't send signature algorithms.
So I think the requirement for signature algorithms comes from the fact that right now, no signature algorithms means SHA-1.
No, I concur. Yeah. I guess I'd heard tell that some servers just sent SHA-256 certificates anyway, no matter what they got in the extension. And if that's not true, or then if that's not true, then we don't have to worry about it. But if it is true, and then we find a significant population that doesn't send it, but that handshakes still work, then we should be like, well, those clients are busted, but we might interoperate with them. But anyway, it's like a measurement problem, so we can just resolve it easily.
Adam Langley, I think we're meant to stop and pause before sharing actual numbers too widely, but I've looked up the actual numbers for Chrome, and they're not as bad as I thought, although they are quite a long way away from us just being able to switch it off.
Yeah,
So
fair enough.
slightly more positive.
All right, so we're at that fun stage. How many people read this draft? Great. How many people saw the mailing list traffic about the other draft that spurned this draft? Okay, good. So I want to go ahead and see if we can ask for working group adoption. There wasn't everybody in the room, but I'd like to get a sense. If you would like to adopt this as a working group item, please hum now. If you would not like to adopt this draft as a working group item, please hum now. All right, let's go ahead. Thanks. We'll verify this on the list.
Hi, so I'm Yavnir, and this is about a TLS Flags Extension. I wrote 00 and a 01 draft during the last IETF and haven't touched it since. So this is about TLS extensions. TLS 1.3 currently has 28 extension types defined. Well, TLS 1.2 had 46, and there are many more that are proposed. Some extensions carry data, but some, like post handshake auth, carry no data at all. The only data they carry is that they're actually there. And then there are some that carry data in some context, like in the client hello, and then they don't in other. So they actually carry one bit of information. They are there. That means either I support something, or I want you to do something, or I am going to do something. And we can call these flag extensions. So each such extension takes 4 bytes, or 32 bits of data. That's 2 bytes for the type, 2 bytes for the length, and that makes my image engineer sad. So we're proposing to do to create a single extension for these flags, and unfortunately that can only apply to future flags because you'll never get the backward compatibility working for the old flags. So this extension will carry a bunch of 1-bit indications in a more efficient way. The actual format is to be decided in the future by this group, assuming that we want to do this. So this really short slot is just for deciding if the group wants to do this or doesn't. So of course I couldn't help myself, and I added a few proposed formats in the following slides. But the big question is, do we want to do this? So one proposal is to take 32 bits, or maybe 16, or maybe 64, or 48, or any other number, and make one extension that will have an extension data that is 4 octets long, total of 8, including the extension header. And this will be present in all client hello or encrypted extensions message. And up to 32 flags can be supported. A 0 bit in this flag represents that the flag is not set or not there, and a 1 bit says that it is. If we ever get to the 33rd flag, we'll get to rethink it or do a new extension or whatever. And I'll remind you that TLS 1.2 had 46 extensions. Well, not all of them flags, but still. Sorry. And the proposal 2 is use as many bits as needed. 1 extension. Flags are numbered from 0 to as many as we ever define, and the extension data field is as long as we need to include the last octet that has a set flag. So if we're smart about it, the popular flags are going to be with lower numbers, so that most handshakes have just short extensions. But of course, we can define a lot of them and then define another one and say, oh, everybody's going to use this because this is needed for post-quantum whatever. So maybe we can be smart and leave a few missing bits at the start so that if we ever get a popular extension down the line, we can assign it a low number. But I don't want us to talk about these 2 slides. So I'm going back to this slide with the big question. Do we want to do this? I mean, it's 4 bytes per extension, and we have no idea how many extensions we're going to have, but do we want to?
Martin Thompson, yes. I have a draft that I think that depends on this one. I don't need to depend on this one. If the working group decides not to do this, then we can keep doing the same old thing as we always have. I note that this has a bit of a bootstrapping problem. It is always the case that a flags extension, a single flags extension, is cheaper than doing anything like this. You need two before this is actually saving you any space. But I think this is a reasonable thing to do. One comment to add to that, you mentioned client hello and encrypted extensions. What about certificate request and certificate?
Right, yeah, that too.
Eric Criscola, vigorously restraining myself from working on the bit format right now. Yeah, I mean, this seems like basically a good idea. We had a discussion yesterday about how to like make the TLS wire format smaller, and this clearly would fit into that general kind of idiom. I'm not too worried about Martin's bootstrapping problem in this. I suggest that we just, the future extensions that are like extensions only be defined this way. And I mean, honestly, like the difference between 4 bytes and 5 bytes for the first one seems pretty minimal given like the size of the handshake at present.
The nice thing about CTLS is that because it's a new wire protocol, you can take all the existing flags and put them in the new extension.
That's an excellent point, and actually suggests that maybe maybe we should do that.
And it doesn't even have to be an extension. Because
yeah, well, we have to be careful about the assignment, about the code point assignments. But yes.
Yeah, this is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore. It was not clear to me how this flags extension works with existing flag-like extensions. Are we planning to assign the existing flag-like extensions to one bit point here? Bit point versus code point? I don't know. And if we are, what do we do if there's a conflict in what's sent between the actual extensions and the...
Right. So in my opinion, we can't ever get rid of the backward compatibility problem, even though TLS 1.3 is young. So everything that currently exists has to stay with a long 4-byte extension, unless it's CTLS where it's a new wire format.
Martin Thompson, I have a solution that might be less pessimistic than that, which is to say that, yes, unfortunately, when you send a client hello, you'll have to send the existing flag extensions as extensions or use SCSVs if that's your preferred mode of signaling these things. That's just unavoidable. But in the presence of this extension in a client hello, the server could choose to send those things in the encrypted extensions and the other messages we were talking about as well. So that does save quite a bit of space, particularly in one of the more space-constrained messages that we tend to have. Alongside certificate, we send encrypted extensions and extensions in certificate requests potentially, and certificate messages even. This does have the potential for saving us quite a bit of space, even for those ones. And I would recommend populating the low bits with, in particular, the renegotiation info extension and the extended master secret extension. Oh, that's not going to work for TLS 1.3. Anyway, along those lines, so that we can signal those properly.
Ben Kadek, I would propose we don't need to hammer out the details in the room.
We don't need to hammer out the details,
but I
no,
agree
but
that there's some
ideas there.
Pretty promising opportunities there.
Ben Schwartz. There's also Quick, which hopefully isn't ossified yet.
All right. So who's read this draft? A fair number of people, actually. I think what we're looking for is, do we want to do this? And this is a working group adoption call. So if you would like to adopt this draft, please hum now. No, you're assumed to be in the yes boat. If you do not wish to adopt this draft, please hum now. Let the record show that I think there was maybe one person that hummed. So this is a good starting point for the draft. And we will confirm this on the list, please.
Do we want to ask those people to send mail to the list if they feel?
Yes, I mean that's the
strongly
whole.
about
If you want to object, you object. Please tell us why on the list. Maybe they know something we don't know. Thanks.
Well, if that's the decision, then should I submit something based on proposal number 2? Because I have no idea what I did with 01. I know that 00 is different from 01, but I don't remember what either of them was.
Just submit the new one. We're gonna. I mean, it's a starting point. If you submit the wrong one, this working group will let you know.
Sure.
Martin's up next. Oh, look at that. Cool fonts.
Chris is asking me to try to keep this quick. I only have this slide. So this is a flag. We have a draft that promises something in the order of 3 times compression for certificates. This one provides similar benefit with a great deal less code, at least in the TLS stack. If you happen to have intermediates already available to you, you can tell the server by putting the flag in the client hello, and the server can say, okay, and just send the end entity certificate. I observe that some servers already do this without any signaling. So it's obviously something that's compatible in some ways. And this uses the flag stuff that we just talked about. Victor.
Victor Vasily of Google. So this is something we did to some extent in the original quick certificate compression. As in we shipped a dictionary of known intermediates, and you could hotlink the dictionary. The question I have is, what happens if you receive a response and then you don't have an intermediary? Do you pay a round trip penalty? Do you hard fail? What do you do?
So there's a longer discussion about that one that's going on. The thinking is not yet complete on that one. If it were possible that we could have some sort of guarantee about knowing about intermediates before they're used, it's possible that we could have a definitive guarantee, essentially, that you have all of the intermediates, and that's a hard fail scenario. If you don't have any strong guarantee, then the fallbacks are pretty ugly and may make me reconsider whether I want to pursue this at all. So I haven't chased that one down yet.
Adam Langley. I'm not clear. Are you suggesting that clients would learn, i.e. on a second connection, tell the server, hey, I probably already got them? Or is the client just always going to send this and chase the HTTP links if it needs to?
So maybe I should have given you a bit more context on what we're doing currently. There's an experiment that we're running in, I think our nightly builds, where we send clients over time every single intermediate, like all of them. We know about all of them.
Right. But, well, I mean, you can get every web PKI intermediate, but if someone's using Firefox
Yes. This was a discussion. I forget who to credit with this. My apologies to that person, but there would be a requirement in this document that's not there currently to say that if you have if you have an understanding that the trust anchor or the intermediate that you're using is not in the standard set for the population that you're sending the request to. Say this is you're doing an interception proxy,
right?
And you want to send the whole chain down, you have to ignore this extension.
So the server would be expected to know that it has a weird chain.
That's basically it. Yeah.
Okay. Does Firefox do AIA chasing?
No. No. This is our replacement for that.
Okay.
As in, it won't be perfectly complete, I understand, but that was an explicit decision on our part. And we can talk about the policies around AIA chasing and all those sorts of things for a long time, I'm sure. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is a clever idea. Certainly gets you better compression than having people indexed into the list. I think that the real question is how good is the actual synchronization with deployed WebPKI. To that end, I suggest an experiment, which is, as you say, Firefox already downloads its entire intermediate list in order to avoid having to do AIA chasing. Therefore, it's quite straightforward to simulate this experiment merely by taking every certificate you get in the internet you ever get, and then A, constructing the chain, and B, constructing the chain without putting the intermediates it gives you. And if that ever, and then as long, and with appropriate elision for things that don't change the web PKI ever at all or fail. And then if the answer is those two have exactly the same set, or more or less exactly the same set of successes, then you know this is a good idea. If those do not have the same set of successes, then you have to like do something else, like version the intermediate sets or something like that. So I think like this seems like actually quite easy to determine whether it's going to work or not by like taking a month of data or something, and then we'll get some sense of whether it's like it's even plausible.
Yep. Thanks.
Alessandro Gadini, Cloudflare. So speaking for a CDN that has a lot of certificate chains, the server doesn't necessarily know if the chain is weird. So because, customers can upload their own certificates.
Yeah, that's true, but I would expect that you would assume that the chains are not weird in the general case.
Possibly, yes.
You're operating on the public internet. I suspect that the uses for the weird chains is limited.
Well, not necessarily, but we do actually have a lot of custom certificates. And I'm mostly worried about, all the weird edge cases where it becomes hard to debug if something goes wrong because maybe someone didn't update their browsers in a while.
Yeah, I'm just speculating here, but you also have the ability to have every single intermediate known to you, and you could determine whether or not those intermediates were present.
Right, but
you could scrape CT in the same way that we're doing it, for instance.
I mean, we've had problems in the past with clients that didn't get the latest list or whatever, and things broke for.
Sure. Yep.
I have a design suggestion. Since it sounds like you're shipping fixed sets and you know what's in those sets, have you considered sending the server an indication of what exactly set of intermediaries you're operating on?
Yes, but maybe this was hopeful on my part that we wouldn't have to do that, but certainly willing to consider that if the experiment that Echo proposes doesn't quite work out. But the problem with that is that the server may not be able to interpret that information in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Ryan Sleevey with Google. It seems like my colleagues have caught a number of things. You've mentioned like Firefox has a complete set based on CT, but CT has a known incomplete set. And so I'm just thinking now, imagining multiple clients implementing this and thinking about compatibility and interoperability. It seems like you would need something like that versioning, right? We already see issues with, say, the trust store selection. I'll share Chrome details, which is, Chrome running on a platform like Windows, you have a variety of trust stores. And a client may believe it has a current version of trust store, but it turns out it's not the case. And the server has no idea of what that case is. So if you're going to propose this, like I'm thinking like, let's imagine that Firefox and Chrome were to implement something like this. You would need those clients to update in lockstep with discovering new intermediates and making sure they propagate. Because if a server believes that it sees this 1 or 0, how does it know it's dealing with a Chrome client that may have it or not have it, or a Firefox client that may have it or not have it? So the idea of sending some version or some indicator seems highly desirable from an interoperability. And it also goes to the processing mode, which is if this is going to fail or cause an RTT, this is one of those things that you could possibly avoid with negotiation at the cost of introducing a fingerprinting vector. Knowledge.
Oh, yay. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Ryan.
Just to jump in here, I've got to clip the line here.
Yeah. This is just too much fun to discuss, I imagine.
Well, I mean, it's real world deployments, right? So at the end of the day, it's super valuable to have these discussions. So
right.
It's
yeah. So I should have corrected something. We do not acquire the intermediates, I don't believe, from CT. That was probably a bit. Through our root program, we require that all intermediates are disclosed to us. Not technically constrained. I think this is the bit that Ryan's waving his hands about. Yeah.
Wait, am I cut off? Should I sit down?
No. I mean, sorry. Then no more people on the line. So keep going.
I was simply going to say that I'm worried about this because it seems bad for Firefox, so I think we're in the wrong position. Let's say that this rolls out and servers start doing this, and like you don't always get intermediates. Chrome does AIA chasing, and so like servers might do it and everything works, everything's great, and then like Firefox is on fire down there and can't talk to this server anymore. Without AIA chasing, I think you're in a bad position and you don't want to do this.
Yeah. No. Okay. We should talk some more about AIA chasing and all of the wonderful properties that has. Yeah.
I agree. It's lack of wonderfulness, but okay.
I would rather put in a fallback in the case of a certificate validation failure than do AIA chasing at this point.
And your fallback is to redo the TLS connection with the bit.
Without the
Ben Schwartz. I just want to point out that if you do change this from 1 bit to some identifier, 4 bytes, whatever, that says this is my collection of certificates that I can validate against, you're at a hair's breadth from a pretty profound change to the TLS validation model, where instead of the server not knowing what PKI set the client has, and therefore having to choose one of the common CAs, the server can learn the CA set of the client before it chooses which certificate to reply with, which has all sorts of potential complex effects on CA selection, the whole CA ecosystem. I think that it's a fascinating area.
I'm just wondering whether this is good or bad or just different.
I don't know.
Wes
Hardiger, ISI. Speaking in the non-HTTP context for once, because a lot of it's been around web focus, but this seems like a perfect example for when a Dane client, like on the mail side, for example, gets a 311 certificate, it should immediately set this bit. And you might want to make a suggestion in the document saying that.
Great idea. Thank you.
All right, so I think there's definitely some interest, but I think there's maybe a little more discussion that needs to happen.
Yeah, I don't think I want to ask for adoption at this point.
Absolutely, that's great, thanks. And we cut the lines off, so Watson, sorry. Next, Nancy is up. Come on, baby. Scruffy. There we go. All right, cool.
I get a whole extra minute. Thank you. Okay, I guess I'll just hold the mic. Oh, I can't wear that because I'm too short. Okay, so I will be talking about a topic that was raised by my authors and I about 18 months ago, and that was with the publication of TLS 1.3 and the deployments, there is an impact to the current network security solutions, and I don't mean the exhaustive set of solutions, but a set of them that do get impacted today. So we put a draft together, and given that I only have the 5 minutes, I just wanted to cover them broadly here. If you download these slides, and if I do have time, I can go through the summary of the use cases and the impact as I put them on the table in the last 2 slides in this deck. But the purpose in here was to say the general goal of the network solutions today as we see them in the different products is effectively to affect and provide the different access controls, whether they're for general access or for the security, as well as providing the auditing capabilities. And auditing could be for general purposes or for security purposes, as well as for compliance, and then using some of the information, as well as solutions that are specific to providing vulnerability as well as threat detection. So in essence, what we're trying to cover, what we describe in the document through the use cases and the deployment scenarios is they need to sometimes introduce the notion of a TLS proxy. Sometimes has been referred as the middle box or both. And so what these proxies do is they can do passive or they can do active inspection. Effectively, passively, what they do is they observe the TLS metadata to be able to affect some of the policies that we have categorized as usage policies for their business compliances, if you will, and then to affect the access control. So from a monitoring, auditing, and the security control functions, it's not that the TLS proxy or the middle box is there all of the time to inspect the data all of the time. But it can actually be taken to action depending on the initial passive inspection, if you will. So with the solutions that are in deployment today, and with the introduction of TLS 1.3, there are some impacts and effects that occur given some of the changes that are introduced in the TLS 1.3 handshake. So the document and the draft is there. Here's the link to it. It's an individual submission. About a year ago, I guess, I brought it to the TLS thread. We received a lot of feedback. We're now in version 4, so I appreciate all of the feedback, good and negative. To improve on the draft, we haven't received any feedback since until today. So at that point, we thought that the draft was stable enough that my goal in here was to try to start the process, if you will, to see if we can publish this as an informational RFC. So I realize it's not quite in the charter, but it is in the TLS scope, if you will, because it is documenting the impacts of the TLS 1.3 on the deployments as we know them today. So that was the original ask. There has been some new additions and comments that we can address, but I think the goal is for us to still seek interest in publication. So I will leave it at that.
We have one person in the mic line. Now we have more people in the mic
I
line.
knew this would happen,
Yeah, we'll
which
just
is
cut
why
it
I was
right.
trying to go
We're going to
fast.
cut it right there, all right? So because we only have so much time left. Just real quick, we have a show of hands of who's actually read this draft. More than all the other drafts.
Wow.
Today so far. All right. go ahead.
Wow. Okay.
All right, let's go.
Mike Ounsworth, I hope this is an easy question. How is this different in one sentence from the ETLS debacle?
Sorry, from
ETLS. or-
Enterprise TLS, the
Enterprise TLS.
stuff that went to Etsy.
To be honest with you, I'm not personally familiar with ETLS. My co-author is here too, so I will ask Fleming if he's familiar. We're not. We were trying to stick to what the standard is about and document it based on the standards. Yeah. Who was that?
Please, introduce yourself. Hi, Stephen Farrell. So I'm not clear if you're asking for this to be adopted by the TLS working group, or you want to go to the independent stream, or what? And I have a follow-up question.
Well, I'm asking the general question because there has been interest when we started the thread. At the time, it's not in the working group charter. It seems like there are effects to the design and the implications of the 1.3. So in essence, I'm asking the group if there is interest.
Okay. Well, I can express active disinterest. I think this would be a waste of time to try and turn into consensus text because we'd be just, as was, I guess, earlier reflected, wasting loads of time rehashing old ground, and I think this is pointless. But by all means, go to the independent stream and talk to the independent stream editor if that's what you want.
We only have time for one more question, by the way.
Nalini Elkins, Inside Products. I support discussing this topic. I think it's important. People are already, vendors are already announcing bypasses to TLS 1.3. I think as engineers, we need to deal with the reality of the situation and not some kind of idealized, politically correct world.
Can we have questions about the draft?
So I've read the draft. I think it is different to ETLS in that this just lists the use cases that are currently impacted by TLS 1.3. The draft has been stable since 104 except for today, so I don't see that it's generated already a lot of dissent, and maybe that would change, but based on how many people have read the draft, it does seem like it has sufficient interest. So I would like to see it progress as an informational draft. And I think someone said it was pointless, but I think there is a point to publishing it.
Ben, are you jumping in line? Thank you.
Are you ahead of me, Ben, or are you just in? Oh, please.
So, like, if we want to publish something from the TLS working group, or, I'm sorry, I'm Ben Kadek, responsible AD, which is why I'm cutting the line. If we want to publish something from the TLS working group or something in the IETF stream, we have to have IETF consensus about what it says. And I could imagine writing a document that says, here are some things that people do and they don't work anymore. And we could probably write a document like that, and we could probably get consensus about that. But it's really hard to go from a document that says, here are some things that don't work anymore, to saying, we wish we could still do these things. And once we make that step, I think it becomes extremely hard to get IETF consensus. And in vein of what Stephen was saying, it would probably waste a lot of people's time. On the other hand, I do think it's really valuable to document that people are doing this and that doesn't work anymore. And it kind of feels to me like the independent stream is a really great home for this.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
So it kind of feels to me that the independent stream is a very good home for this. And I feel a little bit sad that we don't get to say the IETF has looked at this, and we understand that these are things that people are doing and they don't work anymore. But it's really hard to see that it's going to be a fruitful use of people's time to try and get that to happen in the IETF stream.
Okay. So the intent in the draft was not to make insinuation that I wish we weren't doing this. It was merely to document this is the impact of what's happening today. So if that's how...
Okay, so if that's what you want to try to do, I think we can take another look at the draft from that starting point and suggest some text changes. And
please. And so again, the intent is to document the impact. It's not meant to be you have to change 1.3. It's just, this is what is going to happen, just from a documentation standpoint and to raise the awareness, right?
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, thanks.
So we're out of time now, folks.
Oh,
so
what do you mean? 8:09, man. I got 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Eric Pascola, I don't think we should take this up in TLS. This is going to be an incredibly contentious negotiation about the contents of this document. I've sent you other comments. I appreciate you tried to incorporate them, but I don't actually think adequately. And I think it's partly because we actually don't agree about what the situation is. And I just don't understand how that's going to be a useful use of the IETF's time. So this is like a great independent stream opportunity.
All right, so I'm going to take the chair's prerogative here. We're out of time. I just want to tell people that it's difficult to be the chair when people come to these things because all roads that are TLS related come to us first. So they pretty much have to come to us, whether you like it or not. That's how it works. So when they come here and they ask and then they get pushback, things happen. it's clear to me that there would be some dissension if we were to adopt this as a working group draft. The best thing to do, like the other times, is to try to talk to Ben to figure out what to do. Okay. I don't think I'm going to try to take a hum for working group here or there, adoption or not. We're just going to proceed and go to the social, and I'll have a great time. Thank you.
But
Sorry
I do
to cut the
appreciate
line.
you giving me time.
Yes, thank you.
It's just been-
Thanks for. I'm sorry I cut the lines and I did the chair prerogative thing, but I think we're out of time. Thanks.
Sorry. We'll just put you on the agenda.